Do you believe the Jewish quarter and the Western Wall are illegally occupied territory?
Senator, I do not believe that it is illegally occupied territory.
Then why did you support a UN resolution saying that it is?
Senator Cruz.
Mr. Secretary, welcome. You and I had a vigorous conversation in my office yesterday. You said at the time, nobody could have imagined what happened in Israel with this terror attack. I have to say I disagreed then and I disagree now. Many of us not only imagined, we predicted it. You were a critical player in the Obama administration's campaign of appeasement with Iran. You played a pivotal role in flooding over $100 billion to the Iranian regime. The Biden administration has continued that policy, flooding nearly an additional $100 billion to the Iranian regime. That policy of appeasement, sending hundreds of billions of dollars to a theocratic, homicidal, genocidal maniac who leads chants of death to America and death to Israel, has proven catastrophic. The death squads in Israel from Hamas are funded in real and meaningful ways by the billions of dollars the Obama administration and now the Biden administration has flowed directly to Iran. That has proven disastrous. We also have drones. As you know, today, the UN arms embargo on Iran expires. Today, ironically, the day of your hearing. You were pivotal in advocating for UN Resolution 2231, the Iran deal, which is why the arms embargo is expiring today. On October 7th, Hamas used swarms of sophisticated drones in their October 7th attack. Do you believe the world is safer today because of 2231 and the expiration of the arms embargo, allowing Iran now to sell ballistic missiles and long-range drones?
Senator, I think you would have to agree that the history of the U.S. engagement on JCPOA has changed substantially since I sat in this room.
Do you think the world is better and safer with the arms embargo expired?
But Senator, if the U.S. was not...
yes or no? Are we safer today with no arms embargo?
I think it's much more complicated than that because we're not part of JCPOA, therefore there was no extension of the arms embargo. I would have advocated for an extension of the arms embargo, and we might well have...
And by the way, the Biden administration's been in power two and a half years. The arms embargo is expiring today, and you were pivotal in that happening. Let's shift to another thing, because the Biden administration didn't just send money to Iran in massive numbers. It has also sent money to Gaza that went to Hamas. And at the time, I led a coalition of senators urging the Biden administration, do not send money to Gaza because it is controlled by Hamas. It will be used by Hamas for acts of terrorism. We now know that the Biden administration reached the following determination, and I quote, due to its overall strength and level of control over Gaza, we assess that there is a high risk Hamas could potentially derive indirect unintentional benefit from U.S. assistance to Gaza. High risk. Now, as Treasury Secretary, you're familiar with these determinations. Under ordinary anti-terrorism laws, you can't send money where there's a high risk it'll be used for terrorism. But what did the Biden administration do? It waived our anti-terrorism law because their political agenda was so important they were willing to take that high risk. Was it a mistake to send hundreds of millions of dollars to Gaza that in a very real and practical way funded the death squads and funded the rockets that are being used to murder Israelis?
Senator, I was not in government at the time these decisions were made.
Was it a mistake?
I'm not familiar with the back and forth that you're referring to, but my understanding is the funding that went to Gaza was for things like the hospital and humanitarian.
So was OFAC wrong when it concluded there's a high risk that Hamas could derive benefits?
Senator, I would have to look at the document.
You were one of few people that has the expertise to do this.
I have high regard for OFAC. I just am not familiar with the document.
So is the world safer or less safe because hundreds of millions of dollars were sent to Gaza when it's controlled by Hamas?
Senator, Hamas's activities have proven how evil they are and how important it is to
Okay,
deny
so you're not
them
answering that
resources.
question. Let me ask this question.
But I will say
The
this,
Biden
Senator,
administration and the Biden
as
State
Secretary of the
Department
Treasury,
has repeatedly undermined Israel as this attack was ongoing. Within hours of the attack commencing, the State Department sent out a tweet from the Office of Palestinian Affairs, an office that would report to you if you're confirmed, that said, "We unequivocally condemn the attack of Hamas terrorists and the loss of life that is incurred. We urge all sides to refrain from violence and retaliatory attacks. Terror and violence solve nothing." Do you agree with this tweet that was sent by the Biden State Department?
Senator, would have to read it. I'm not familiar with it.
You're not familiar with it.
I want to just go back to the last point that you made.
Hold on a second. You're not familiar with this tweet. They sent it out at 3 in the morning while the attacks were unfolding. I blasted it at 3 in the morning, and they deleted it within the hour because it was shameful. They were telling Israel, do not respond while your citizens are being murdered. And by the way,
the President of the United States has stated clearly the policy of the United States. I agree with the President of the United States.
I understand, but at the same time, this administration repeatedly walks back what he says. So here's another tweet sent from the State Department. Turkish Foreign Minister and I spoke, this is from Secretary Blinken, spoke further on Hamas's terrorist attack on Israel. I encourage Turkey's advocacy for a ceasefire and the release of all hostages held by Hamas immediately. Do you agree with this tweet from the Secretary of State calling for a ceasefire immediately after this attack began?
I think the President and the Secretary of State have made clear that Israel has a right and a responsibility to defend itself.
Do you agree with this tweet from the State Department?
Senator, I can't respond to tweets that you're reading to me.
Why, are you not familiar with it?
I'm telling you,
you haven't followed what the administration has said on this? By the way, they deleted this tweet as well. Day after day after day, this administration has systematically undermined Israel. And finally, you advocated for UN Resolution 2334, which declared much of Israel illegally occupied territory, including the Jewish quarter in Jerusalem and the Western Wall. Do you believe the Jewish quarter and the Western Wall are illegally occupied territory?
Senator, I do not believe that it is illegally occupied territory.
Then why did you support a UN resolution saying that it is?
I think we could have a conversation about that, but it's going to take me more than 10 seconds to respond to it, which
all
I'd
the
be
time
happy
you
to
like.
do.
Allow the witness to respond, if you allow the witness to respond.
Yeah. So first, if I can respond, you've said a lot of things that you have not given me a chance to respond to. I sanctioned Hamas in 2015. Hamas was sanctioned again today. So I don't think it was a fair characterization of either what I did or this administration. Second of all, the issue of a UN resolution it was a UN resolution that all the parties had to agree to, that was negotiated to take out the most offensive provisions. Whether it was a good or a bad resolution in the end, the president decided to abstain rather than have a worse resolution come out. You can agree or disagree with that.
You could have vetoed it.
But he was trying to prevent a worse resolution.
You could have vetoed it.
So,
Time has expired. Senator Romney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, along with a handful of other senators, were in Israel over the weekend and had the chance to meet with leadership there, former leadership of the country, as well as with military leaders and with families of hostages. And I know that your confirmation can be done by one party alone, and you're likely to be confirmed on that basis. But that being said, there are a few things I'd like to pass along to you, assuming that you do become ambassador. One is that our chief of mission is a highly respected individual, respected by the Israeli leadership, and is working in the interest of the United States, and is someone who we respect enormously as well. Meeting with the families of hostages, their stories and the experiences are heartbreaking. The outrage, the brutality, the inhumanity of Hamas in the way they took children and others and grabbed them and took them across the border is hard to comprehend. And we need to do everything within our power to secure the release of those hostages. I'd also note that one of the generals, the leading general of the Israeli Defense Forces, said something that's very powerful. He said, Israel and Jews don't do vengeance. We're not going to target Palestinians and try and kill a lot of Palestinians to make up for all the Jews that were killed. That is not our intent. We will do everything in our power to avoid civilian casualties among the Palestinian people. But they're being used as human shields, and in many cases, there will be deaths, but they will be unfortunate and not part of an effort on the part of Israel to carry out vengeance. I'd also note that there is a responsibility that every government has, and the Israeli government, of course, has this responsibility as well, to secure the safety and the life of their citizens. And in this case, Hamas has made it very clear that as long as they exist, Israeli citizens' lives are going to be at risk and will be sacrificed. And therefore, it is unacceptable for Hamas to continue to exist, certainly in proximity that they have enjoyed from the Gaza Strip. I would note also that in discussion of what comes next, what's going to happen after, let's assume that the Israeli military is successful in rooting out Hamas. What happens after that? There was no clear response to that, and I didn't expect necessarily a response to that because the Israeli government and military is focused on how they're going to be successful in rooting out Hamas. That's what comes first, but what comes next is something which will be a great priority for the United States ambassador there. I'm going to note that I was very troubled by the report of their permanent subcommittee on investigations that was carried under the direction of Senator Portman. I concur in the questions that were being raised by Senator Rubio. That is very troubling to me. I wonder how the White House could have brought forward a nomination given that report and given the clear indication that Republican members at least, and hopefully some Democrat members as well, would be troubled by and moved by the results of that report from the subcommittee on investigations. Finally, a question, and that relates to a tangential issue, and that is there is most recently a response or an effort has been promoted by the administration to provide $6 billion of Iranian funds to Iran to release them as part of the prisoner exchange. That's obviously been put on hold. But I guess I question, and you have experience in this regard, the idea that dollars are going to be used for humanitarian purposes only. I heard the administration say, we're going to get you your $6 billion back, but it has to only be used for humanitarian purposes. Now, I know enough about money to know that funds are fungible, and that if we say, we're going to give you $6 billion, but you've got to use it for food and hospitals for your population, Iran can say, thank you, that's what we use the $6 billion for. Now we've freed up $6 billion that we otherwise would have used ourselves for food and hospital. And now we can use that to build nuclear weapons or provide money to Hezbollah or Hamas. And so, am I wrong? It strikes me that when we say that we're going to give you money, but only for humanitarian purposes, it's entirely disingenuous. It's a way of disguising the fact that we're providing funds to a state sponsor of terror. It's misleading to the American people, misleading to the world. Is there any other way of reading that?
Well, Senator, first, I want to agree with you about the difference between defending a country and vengeance. And there's a difference between anger and fury and vengeance. If any of us lived in a country where that large a part of our population had been brutalized in a way that we couldn't hardly imagine, controlling your fury is almost beyond the imagination. I believe they're going to do the right thing and try their best to do it to defend the country, not for vengeance. You know, on the question, you didn't ask it as a question, but the report of the special committee. You know, I have remained close with Senator Portman even since we both left government. I spoke to him as recently as last night. I would just invite anyone who questions whether he thinks that I'm somebody who keeps my word, I would just suggest they talk to Senator Portman. On the question of fungibility of money, as an economic matter, I have many times made the point that money is fungible. But when you're dealing with Iran, you're not dealing with a rational economic player. You're dealing with an evil, malign government that funds its evil and malign activities first. So when Iran gets access to food and medicine for its people, that's food and medicine they wouldn't otherwise have. I can't say that there's no leakage. And when I supported the JCPOA, what I said was our intelligence